In dusty military archives and basements, the thousands of paintings by World War II combat artists have been stored and forgotten. Seen by millions during the war, this art was a graphic symbol of what was at stake. At the time, a government official said, "If the war is lost, no artist will ever paint again in pursuit of his own imagination." The paintings are a lasting record of how the doughboy, the leatherneck, the dogface lived and died.
Goodbye, dear, I'll be back in a year, for we're in the Army now. That was a popular song. I'll be back in a year. Goodbye, dear, I'll be back in a year, for I'm in the Army now. Well, we knew we were going to be in the Army for a while.
Asking for a declaration of war against Japan.
And dastardly attack Japan.
The great Pearl Harbor naval base
Columns of heavy
on the
black
island of
smoke
Pearl Harbor.
went skyward from Pearl Harbor.
A street of war.
America was stunned. Congress unanimously declared war. A country divided about entering the global conflict was now united. Everyone wanted to contribute.
When the war started, I wanted to get in the Navy to do something for my country. And I found that because I was nearsighted, I was 3A, that I didn't have a chance of getting into the service. So I decided to go and volunteer my services and asked if I could do anything for the war effort, that I was an artist. And lo and behold, they needed me. They wanted me to draw submarine wakes so that the planes could see the shape of the wake behind and know how far down the submarine was.
The day of leaving home, that's kind of a traumatic thing for a young fellow that hadn't been that far away from home before. I know the day that I had to leave, I was quite fearful. I'd heard stories about the Marine Corps that curl your hair. I was afraid of it. Yet I knew that was the place where perhaps I could do my best art. I had been assigned to a Marine brigade, and I heard those ominous words when we stopped. "Assault engineers, assemble here." And my name was one of the first, the word assault. It turned out there would be a modicum of some camouflage taught, but I was to be trained primarily as a demolition man.
As a tribute to democracy, painters are permitted to draw whatever they see, wrote a Marine officer. Every branch of the military set up war art programs to ensure that their contribution would be remembered. The Navy recruited painters and made them officers. The Marines searched for talent among the fighting ranks, and Army brass reassigned enlisted men.
I received a memo, and it said, "Please report to General Eisenhower's office at 0800 hours or whatever you see. Everything is very formal, and you do it." And I did it. And I was petrified. What in the world would General Eisenhower want with me? Well, when I got there and I was ushered into this office, there was the great man. And he said to me, "Lieutenant Reep?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "We have 5 divisions going into Italy." He said, "There they are on the table." He said, "I want you to pick one division and assign these other 4 artists to a division. You are going to be painting." And I had to decide very quickly, and one was an armored division. So I took it because I hated to walk. And I looked up to tell the general that I had done this, and he was gone. He was out in the hall doing calisthenics, and a colonel said, "All right, that'll be fine." And I was dismissed. I tell you, it all so frightening, and it was all so wonderful. I couldn't believe it. It was a fairy tale.
I'd finished basic training, and here was a letter from Washington telling me that I had been appointed the war artist for whatever theater I wanted. I picked India, Burma, and China. And they said, no, you can't. We're sending you to England.
The group of war artists were sent a memorandum stating that we believe that our Army Command is giving you an opportunity to bring back a record of great value to our country. Express, if you can, realistically or symbolically, the essence and spirit of war. You may be guided by Blake's mysticism, by Daumier's humanity and tenderness, or better still, follow your own inevitable star.
It was an enormous opportunity. And if you're supposed to make your interpretation of an event like a war, you know, you're not sure that you're the person to do it. I mean, who is, really? I found all through my 2.5 years overseas that I was trying to find a way to describe this event called war.
I was on deck sketching and drawing the scenes in the harbor around me. There were some battleships there and cruisers, and a friend came by. He said, "Come on, Gib, we're going forward and play some hearts now." He and I always played hearts when we were at sea. And this time I said, "I'll see you guys later. I want to finish what I'm doing here. I've got to finish this drawing I'm making." And so he said, "Okay, we'll be up forward on the elevator deck." A short time after that, while I was drawing, the whole front end of that ship blew up. A huge sheet of flame burst into the air, and it sucked the air right out of my lungs. And it came back together again around my head. Like I went deaf after that, and it knocked me down. Blew my shirt right off of me. And it came right up through where those guys were playing cards. And the fact that I didn't go, I guess, is why I'm still here. I've often wondered why I was always one jump ahead of something.
When I got to Washington, I found in a week I was going to be sent up to the Aleutians as an artist. And it was a terrible time. There were terrible storms going on all of that fall. Except I found a violets blooming up in the mountain in November, which was amazing to me. And I remember painting on this blizzard, and I had my canvas set up and was painting the scene there, and suddenly this wind came and all the gravel came up and stuck on my canvas, and then it wheeled off into the wind, and I went searching for it and found it on a wood pile, and I left it like it was, and it's there now in the Navy Department, all plastered with gravel and grit, and it's a storm, and it looks like a storm, all this stuff going across the canvas.
Well, the assignment was to cover the medical corps in the Southwest Pacific, and that meant the whole package, from the time that someone was wounded and a battalion aid man went out to bring him in to give his first attention until he got on a hospital ship and was sent back home.
More than 24 artists were commissioned by Abbott Laboratories of Illinois. Much of their focus would be the work of the medical corps in Europe and the South Pacific. The hope was that art depicting this struggle against death and disease would compel the public to buy war bonds.
I met a colonel, and I told him I wanted to see everything in the front line. And he said, "All right, I have a group of people up on top of a mountain that's been cut off, and you and I are going up to see what's going on up there." So we started up this mountain through this dense growth of bamboo, and at one time there was a terrible cry in the jungle, and everybody said, "Hit the dirt." I thought, "Oh my God, this is going to be it, you know." Well, after we were there a while, one of the natives got the word to the Australians that it was only a jungle bird. But in the meantime, while I'm lying down in this steaming hot jungle, I'm looking at this guy's foot right in front of my eyes, who had never had a shoe on all his life, of course, and it had red clay on it, or in the cracks. And I thought, boy, those are rather interesting cracks, you know. I got so much interest in these cracks, thank heavens, I forgot my fears for a moment.
America's Picture magazine believed its readers should understand the human cost of battle. So they dispatched 25 combat artists to the front lines, along with their photographers. A shocked public was unaccustomed to seeing the color of war. One reader wrote, "God, how could you? Why such a picture?" Another wrote, "Congratulations, We can't have too much stark reality. Sobering images were not unusual in Yank magazine. The Army Weekly provided GIs with their own artists, writers, and photographers. Candid war coverage, news from home, and glamour pinups made the magazine indispensable for 10 million soldiers.
Well, Yank magazine is one of the best jobs in journalism to come out of this war. It's for enlisted men. It's run by enlisted men. This is Sergeant Brody, who was in the South Pacific. Before he drew the enemy, he had to fight him.
Before the war, I was sketching sports for the San Francisco Chronicle. When I first arrived and moved up to the front and heard firing, I was frozen with fear. And I mean really frozen with fear. I listened to it. I didn't want to advance. I didn't advance. I couldn't advance. I just was frozen with fear.